to a CDMA provider that normally doesn't do that? Well, I've noticed actually, and I've showed this to you, that the caller ID entry actually remains. It's almost as if that provider that you ported to doesn't then go and add, wireless entry, wireless caller or unavailable in that entry. They don't overwrite what the old entry was from that other provider that added the entry. Mm-hmm. So your name and that number stay even though you ported it to a CDMA provider. So just by looking at all these different use cases, a person porting to CDMA or a person porting from CDMA, et cetera, you can start to uncover the behavior of these providers and how they interact with caller ID databases and who's sharing what databases, et cetera.
Yeah, it's really cool because you can actually begin to see trends, right? So, I mean, you see formats of names, like first name, last name, or whatever, and you start to identify, oh, hey, this is so-and-so provider, that's so-and-so provider. And that's why the HLR is so important, because we can see that, oh, it's a ported number, blah, 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 they're ported to a CDMA or whatever, but they used to be on so-and-so. And eradicating those anomalies are really important.
And one of the things with the HLR providers is you don't get information for CDMA providers. So you're not going to get information on CDMA. This is all GSM targeted. Although there was one particular company where we found that a CDMA provider was giving us an MSC value in return. It was kind of odd because that wasn't supposed to happen. They didn't even advertise that they support these people. And so we decided to call technical support. So we called technical.
This was a great call too. So I wish we would have recorded it. It was
like
really
4 a.m. When we were doing our first talk at Source Boston, and we're like, we shouldn't be seeing MSC values for a CDMA provider here. They don't support this, but there's a number coming back. So it has nothing to really do. This is a tangent, but we called them up, and they were like, "Oh, hello, sir. Who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, my name's Mike." We're seeing something kind of odd. And he's like, "Oh, let me patch you to our network operations center in Serbia." I'm like, "Cool, you do that." And Sergey picked up, and he was more than happy to help us look at this problem and understand it. And I mean, they are great companies.
Actually, he was great.
And these are this is the best customer support I've ever seen.
Yeah, I've never had this kind of luck with any American services, unfortunately.
They didn't even ask me to hey, do you pay us for services? It's like, I'm Mike. Mike, your biggest customer? Come on. From America? Yeah, that Mike.
So the unavailable part is really cool, right? Because this tells me that either you're a burner, which is awesome to find burners, or it's an unallocated number. So burners are very fun, as I'm sure you can understand. And we'll get to the reason why it's really important to find these later. Of course, when you see unavailable, typically if you're searching through these numbers, you say unavailable means not allocated, boring. But with the help of HLR, you now know, oh, that's probably prepaid, and that's probably live, and that's really cool, as we'll discuss later.
Yeah, and speaking of prepaid phones, usually when you buy a prepaid phone, I walked into an AT&T store and they were like, "What's your name?" I said, "Nick D. Petrillo." So they wrote it down as like Mike D. Petrollo, and I was like, "Cool, all right." And in any case, the number they give me, if you go look it up in the caller ID database, it's some other random girl's number that had that number before me, and they just associate it. And they never update that entry for prepaid phones, but it's just kind of funny. Also, I liked having LOL at the end of my name. I thought that, the guy actually wrote that down. I was like, "Are you serious? You really think that my name ends in LOL? Nick D. Patrol, lol. All right. That's cool."
So this is the summary, right? You've got HLR, you've got CNAME. Clearly, you can see how this is a very powerful tool, right?
Yeah, we're adding context to these numbers now.
Yeah.
a name to the number. And then, of course, with the internets and Google, you can start to put a face to the name, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and the great thing is that you can, well, I guess I shouldn't say great. The academically interesting thing is that you can target people. So if I think some guy's really cool, like Nick, and I just decide, hey, I wonder if Nick has other phone numbers that I don't know about.
Lots.
Then I can
They're not
find
for
out.
you.
Oh, well, they are now, baby.
So were you using this stuff to target people? You told me
No, absolutely not.
You told you told me this is not what we talked about.
Well, you know what?
I'm out of here.
We were going to pretend to get in a fight at the end of the conference over this, but apparently we're going to do it now. So this is kind of an example here, right? This is the map, okay? So what we're able to do, we just associate caller ID information with an actual MSC, And then we can say, hey, Nixon's so-and-so, right? So I know he's generally in the main Providence area, right?
Nowhere.
Yeah, nowhere. So he's generally in this vicinity. And that's cool. That gives me a kind of an idea of where he's at. But as you can see, it's very high level, right? As we discussed earlier, it doesn't tell me what street corner he's on. You know, it doesn't tell me what Starbucks he's on. But it's information that I shouldn't have, especially as a private individual, right?
Yeah, and this is something that Tobias would touch upon, and if you go look at his video and his documentation on all this, tracking cell phones is kind of scary. I mean, it's not like CSI Miami where it's like zoom and enhance, and where is this guy? Oh, he's behind me, which would be kind of awkward, I guess. But specifically, yes. Oh no, if I'm going to go CSI Miami, I'm going full out.
Sonny Crockett's coming back, guys. Watch out.
No, so to reiterate what Don said, as civilians anywhere in the world, you really should be able to tell you're in this country. Never mind you're in this city, and never mind that you were in this city for this long, and never mind that you were in these cities for these longs. And I know when you came and went, and I know when you were in this country and how long you were there, and then you came back through this country you were there for let's say an hour, then you were off network because you were on a plane, and then you landed in the United States. Through the eastern side, and then you drove to California. That's a lot of information. It's not GPS, latitude and longitude, but once you start to look at it in that sense, it can kind of be a little scary. So
yeah.
And thanks to all the unbelievable research that the CCC does and all those German GSM hackers do, all this original research is available to look at and explore and have fun like we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. Great foundation from those guys. So it's really important to figure out how we actually build these maps, right? Because as we said earlier, that number's opaque. That doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not going to associate it immediately with Providence or Denver or wherever. But I have techniques, right? Because we've talked about the HLR and we've talked about CNAME, and we can go out and amass all this information together to start building out a map of the United States, right? So now I can say, all right, let's start with known values. I want to map everything for AT&T. I want to map everything for the smaller providers, Viero, whatever, right? I start out with a name, okay? And then I just pick a location. I pick every place in the United States. Or I just say, hey, what's up with Michigan, right? And then I just go out and gather actual samples. So the samples are the big deal, right? And we talked about samples earlier. We just pull NPA and XX, and then based on actual time, we can figure out where people are. And time is important because, of course, what's our normal day like, right? We get up in the morning, hang out at the house for a little bit, and we go to work.
Unless you've been fun employed like me, you get up in the morning, you watch your girlfriend go off to work, you go back to sleep, maybe eat some Cheez-Its out of the box, call your girlfriend, your other girlfriend Megan Fox a little bit.
Before this gets too depressing, let's move on.
Then you watch your girlfriend come home from work, she makes you dinner.
So you can see the problems that are associated with this, right? It's pretty clear that we all live on a routine, right? We go to work, we come home, we sleep. We tend to be stagnant individuals. There are always going to be the go-go people that have their 9 to 5 and then go nuts and go do 20 things after hours. And that's cool, but they're probably still working. And they probably still sit in the same place for 8 hours a day. And what's interesting is we can map that information, right? So if I pick a location, okay, and I say, I live in Denver, so we'll just pick Denver. And I say, okay, let's check out all the NPA and XX for Denver specifically, right? And then we go and filter them through HLR like we discussed earlier, right? So we know that all these providers own these specific numbers. And then I pull the HLR several times during the day when I'm most likely guaranteeing that you're going to be sleeping, working, or chilling at home with your family, right? And I'm taking samples throughout those time periods throughout the day. Maybe I do it for a day, maybe I do it for a week. Depends on how much I care and how lazy I am.
The more samples you get, like the more days you do something like this, let's say you pull let's say you pull the location at like 2:30 a.m., 3:30 p.m. when you think you should be at work, and then when you think you should be at work, then at like 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. when you should be home again, you can just you do this for a week, and then you can see, okay, these 10,000 people, they do that. Maybe they're at home in this area, then they drive an hour to this area, then they're back in that same original area this time, and there's going to be anomalies, and you're going to have to throw a lot of this stuff out. But generally speaking,
you'll
what
see a little
emerges,
bit about that.
Yeah.
What's really cool is that you can actually start to realize that this information is a lot less variant than you'd think it would be, right? Because we always think that everybody's traveling all the time, doing crazy stuff, but we're really not as a society. And that's very evident in these samples. We just go out and pull this information, and really, I've been able to consistently prove that the exact same samples guarantee this MSC is associated with this city, right? If I sample an afternoon versus sampling a week or a month, we've almost been able to, with large enough set of samples, guarantee that it's going to be that accurate. And that's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because you have to look at that information as something that isn't such a huge window into our daily lives. But it is. And that window gives us, as attackers, a lot of opportunity to do much nastier things than we'd think. And that's kind of what our intent is here, is just to get people thinking about our actions and the information that's out there, and how this information can really define our points of vulnerability in our threat surface as a whole.
And one thing too about the granularity of these MSC values is, if you're in a big city like Denver, you might have 2 MSC values that cover the eastern and western side of Denver. If you're in Rhode Island, you might have one MSC that just covers the entire state. So you got to remember that if you got to take all of that into consideration when you're trying to track somebody, or you're taking samples, like he was just saying. You got to remember that population density determines how many towers are going to be in a particular area. Do they need to add another mobile switching center to handle load? Who knows, right? So a lot of that stuff comes into play.
And we'll talk about enhancements later, where we actually can try to infer information based on your traveling patterns, based on the MSCs that we see over time, and try to gather more information that allows me a window into where you are, what you're doing, and all that other stuff. But let's just take a simple example, right? Let's map T-Mobile inside Denver, okay? So what are the requirements? We just discussed this, right? Phone numbers owned by T-Mobile. This is easy, right?
We already talked about this.
NPA, NXX, HLR, filtering out all the providers. Very simple. We take samples over time. The results, very accurate. Very, very accurate. So we can go ahead and skip and see, all right, here's NPA and NXX again. Let's skip this crap. So here's actually what we want to see, okay? So this is an example of actual NPA XX dumps. So I just want to give you guys a good example of, if you haven't seen it before, this is what the actual database looks like. So you can actually just easily pull
Is this
T-Mobile.
a laser pointer? Oh my God. Do you want a laser pointer?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to burn my eyes. So it's really straightforward, really easy to see. A lot of people have been familiar with this before, right? But it's important for those that don't understand, aren't familiar with this, to know that this is how simple it is, right? It's really laid out this easily. And it's laid out like this for a reason, because providers need to have blocks of numbers, because they need to have those numbers to allocate them to their subscribers. Very simple, very elegant. And you can even sometimes have the actual assigning date. And the assigning date will actually tell you, oh, hey, T-Mobile got this in 2009 or 2001 or whatever.
And that assigning date might be a time when it was ported over or whatever.
Exactly. That's the point that I was getting to, is that
in fact,
sometimes that can give you a clue. If you're looking through for a specific provider and you see that provider was actually allocated this number before that provider existed, oh, hey, that's probably ported. Maybe it's not relevant to me. Maybe it is. It depends. So anyway.